was, I remember, my exposure to it had to do with, the first thing I can remember about that sort of thing was, back in the 50s on television, there was some, in the middle 50s, like 55 or something, there was some show on about, it was like a documentary about people who had been taking drugs that were, at that time they were said to be, they created psychosis. That was their rap, you know, the medical, you know. And there was this guy who was an artist, you know, and they'd given him some, and they had a bunch of his pictures, you know, before and after, you know. Well, what do you feel now? Like that, you know. I don't recall the specifics, but
do you know the one that I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, the one that's in Life magazine.
Yeah.
The one that's in that Life thing on the mind.
Yeah, he was twisted on the natural.
Yeah, he was just a guy who really went bananas. But this was another that sort of thing. But that was the first time I remember. I was interested at that time. You know, I was pretty young too, but I definitely wanted to try something like that for sure. And so, you know, everybody had been smoking pot for a long time and maybe getting a little psilocybin or something, but there was mostly things like crystal and meth and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, bam, there was LSD, you know, on the streets. And that in itself was an incredible thing, because then you had this, at that time it was also very invisible in some weird way too. You could just get so out of it and go wandering around anywhere. And, you know, nobody would be hip, nobody would pick up on it, no matter how weird it seemed. And so there was this sort of freedom starting to spring out in terms of public audacity. At least that's the way I equate it. You know, that's what I sort of related to. Because before that, I would never have done that. Probably, I would never have gone out raving on the streets or anything like that. You know, maybe, but I would have thought about it a lot. You know, that kind of thing. But anywhere around there was LSD. Everybody sort of got it at once because it was all part of the same continuum, really. So, you know. Playing in the park is always fun and stuff like that. But for sheer unmitigated, total, all-out craziness, you couldn't beat the acid test. I mean, really, nothing has ever been like those in terms of. I mean, they were really the most fun of any of those kind of things. They were really fun.
Lots of gadgets to play with.
Oh yeah, and totally crazed things too. Like, I remember the one at the Fillmore, the old Fillmore was tremendously successful because they had all those little cubby holes. Remember how that place was organized? They had all these little rooms and back scenes, and there was like a bar up and back, and all kinds of different levels and stuff going on in there. A lot of little rooms in the early days. Later on, a lot of that stuff got opened up and boarded out and so forth. Changed a little bit, but originally it had that segmented thing going, the big room and then lots of little rooms. And so the little rooms and the big room, there were like microphones distributed all over the place, and all different people with mixers and tape recorders and all this stuff, and speakers all over the place. And so somebody might say something down in the corner, it would go through a delay, and you might hear it up in some other room, completely unrelated, but there would be this incredible timing thing that would be happening, so that everything that happened would sort of fit right in perfectly, you know. Both in real time, on tape, you know, just in these accidental microphones. Somebody would find a microphone on the floor and say, "Hey, is anybody there?" And all of a sudden they'd hear their voice, huge, coming from all over, you know. And they'd start raving, you know, and then it would go away, you know, and something else would come up. And all this, you know, kind of continuous weirdness, you know. It's just so funny, you know, so funny sounding. And everybody's reactions to it were so funny and great, you know. And then the cops came and busted that one. That acid test was a good one for the whole cop show. The cops came in and they looked around, and here's this one of Ron Boise's big sculptor, big thunder machines there, you know, people banging on it and pouring Day-Glo paint over it, and it's making this incredible din resonating, and weird tapes and weird sounds going on, and people running around, all this just totally bananas shit going on. And here's these straight, good old Foursquare San Francisco Irish cops, you know, a whole bunch of them, dozen or so of them, and they're in there, who's in charge here, you know? You know, it's like the limit of the absurd, you know, who's in charge here? And then there's cops standing there and standing in the middle of the floor, you know, with half a dozen freaks around them, raving at them, you know, raving strange things at them. There was some cop on the stage, I remember, an amazing scene with Weir and Phil, And Weir and Phil are both tremendous anti-authoritarian guys. They hate any authority figures. And here's this cop, like the lieutenant up there, trying to make an announcement over the microphone, which is the dials are being run by some madman up in the balcony somewhere, and so the cop's voice is coming in and out, and Kesey is raving some sort of semi-patriotic slogans over the top of the cop's rap about, we have to clear the place out, and the thing would cut off right in the middle of his rap. And Phil and Weir are there arm in arm, around each other, and they're singing something like the Star Spangled Banner real loud in the cop's ear, while some big bear of a freak is banging his hand with a tambourine, and the cop's looking. I mean, it was just so funny, really hilarious, just amazing. God. All this funny stuff for timing, is like just a huge Marx Brothers movie or something like that. Really, really funny. And the neat thing about those things was that accidental quality of them that was great, because it was a public thing, only cost $1 to get in. And anybody could come in and suddenly find themselves in this weird scene, and that was like part of that change. I remember, during the course of the acid test, there would be guys. There was this one guy I remember who came in. The very first one he came there, he was there with a suit, and looking real straight for that time, 60s, real straight. And he was there looking around, and he got high. Later on in the evening, you see him, his coat's gone, and everything. The next acid test, which he found out about, he comes there, and this time he's dressed in his sports clothes, doesn't have the suit anymore. The next one after that, he's got a sweatshirt and some Levi's, and then the next one after that, he's got a funny hat, and, it's just like you see this metamorphosis going on from week to week that was just, it was really neat, Everybody was so enthusiastic about those things. They were just amazing, It was for, the kind of, the only word for it really is fun. It was really fun.